So welcome to today's podcast. Today we are talking about how to create new content ideas. This is a really good discussion because it's a discussion we often have at Podimos, because I think it's probably the number one challenge that people have, just knowing what to create, what's going to work, what's going to resonate. So we have some really interesting frameworks here at Podimos and how we do this. And this is, we're excited to share it today. So I've asked Jenna to join us today. Jenna is our content marketing manager, so deals with the majority of our content here at Podimos, and everything that you see going out on social media is as a result, and actually on the website, everything really is as a result of Jenna. So Jenna, I think I've just introduced you already. Is there anything I've missed?
No, I don't think so. It's nice to be on this side of the recording. I'm usually the one watching and taking notes, so it's very different to actually be talking on the podcast.
Well, I think this is your area of expertise, so you'll have a lot to say. So on today's podcast, we're really going to go through different ways. So first of all, we're going to go through why are we actually creating this content? What are we trying to do? We're then going to talk about different ways to do this. And there's lots of different ways we have, but there's one main way we use at Podimos, and it's very effective. So we'll talk through that, what that looks like. We'll go into quite a bit of detail around that, and then we'll look at some other things that we can do as well, and also maybe also how we can use this content in the future. So there's a lot of things to go through today. So, Jenna, to start off with, let's talk about why do we even write content? What is the purpose of what we're doing here?
Well, I mean, I'd say I'm quite biased because I love all things content, but I really think that content is one of the most important areas of marketing, because essentially marketing is all about building trust, and content is the way that you do this, or the most helpful way to do this. So 70 to 80% of the buying decision is already made before somebody even gets in contact with your company. So you need to influence this decision by providing all the information that the people need, or your audience need, to make a decision so that they will then get in contact with you. So all this content needs to build trust, it needs to answer their questions, and it needs to make you look credible.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, because why is it now 70, 80 to 80%? I think if you look on the internet, they'll say readily it's 70% of the buyer's decision is made online, but that's definitely moving forward now. And the whole reason is because there's so much information and people are so good at finding things out. And actually they only want to talk to somebody once they've made a really good decision in their mind. So it really is pushing in that way. So it's sort of almost redefining what sales and marketing do. So, marketing now have a much bigger role in sales than they ever did, because of this buyer shift to actually finding everything out online. And we find this in consumer markets and also in B2B. So this isn't unique to one side or another. It's across both.
Yeah, 100%.
So we spoke about building trust. Why are we actually even building trust? Like, what's important about that?
I think that if your audience doesn't trust you, they're going to look elsewhere to find your competitors who they do trust, because they've been given all of that information.
Yeah, so it leads to potentially, if you have more trust, you're going to end up with them getting in contact with you and then moving through your buyer's journey versus somebody else's.
Yeah, exactly. People want to be comfortable in the decision they're making when they're investing a lot of money. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to be comfortable making that decision.
Yeah, it's totally true.
So, Claudia, you've worked in medical device for a lot longer than I have. So you obviously have a lot of experience with coming up with content. How would you say is the best way to approach it?
I think there's loads of ways you can approach it, and we'll talk about different ways today. I think the best way and the way that you can generate the most really relevant content is by just answering the questions that your audience have. And that may sound really obvious, but why are you doing that? You're answering your questions because you want to move them through their buyer's journey. And what's stopping them moving through their buyer's journey is doubt, fear, lack of trust, all these sorts of things. And that's what makes them go to other places. So if you can alleviate all that fear, so if you can alleviate all those feelings, then you're much more likely to build that trust and to end up with the ultimate, them getting in contact with you. So the best way is always answering the buyer's questions. And there's lots of different ways to do this, because you might say, right, well, what are those questions? And actually, we can talk through them a little bit later about what they might be. But the exciting thing, this is the really exciting thing about answering the buyer's questions, is that it never ends. So, where people are saying content, I don't know what to write, actually, there's a never ending amount of content. You've just got to think about it slightly differently. And it's not about saying what you want to say. That actually is really quite irrelevant. It's all about what your audience need to hear. And as soon as you tap into that, and I know we say it all the time in marketing, but as soon as you truly tap into that, you have endless content, and it's really fun and it has a huge impact.
So in terms of putting that into practice, in practical terms, how do you actually come up with those questions? How do you know the questions that your audience is asking?
That's a really great question. So there's two ways. Well, there's one way that's split into two sections. There's more than that, but we'll go for the one way first. So really, you need to come together as a company. And you need to ask, you can work with an agency, but we're not going to know the questions your audience are asking. There are certain ways we can look at it. So we can look at social media, we can look at search engines and things like that. And Jenna, you can talk about that more than I can. But actually, the best way to really find the questions that your audience or your customers are asking is to ask the people who are directly in front of your customers, because they will have the same questions every day asked to them. And if you can answer those questions on your website, absolutely fantastic. So, how do we do that? And how does that work the best? Is actually by bringing everybody together. So bringing the sales together, marketing, often commercial, and anybody else who is customer facing, and really walking through the different types of questions that we know people ask on a regular basis. And they're broken down really into 7. Well, there's 5, but an additional 2 that those sort of questions are. And we'll walk through them in a bit, but it's things like, cost. That's the number one thing everybody asks about. And that's a very potentially controversial one in medical device, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's what problems people have, or problem questions, what's the best type of device, comparisons with other devices or other services, and then also reviews. So those are the main things. There's also the other 2, which things like how to, and other ones as well, but those are the main things that we know people search for online. So those are the sort of things we should be addressing. But the way to find those questions is to bring the whole team together and do a workshop with them and, really pull out that information. But it's an ongoing thing. I know I've talked for quite a while here, but it's an ongoing thing because once the whole company gets involved in this answering the questions, you'll find it's never ending and you'll never finish needing content, never.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that the best content plans happen when the whole company, the whole team is on board and everyone gets involved with not necessarily creating the content, but helping you to come up with those ideas.
Yeah, totally.
I think we should talk about SEO as well and the role that can play, SEO research can play in helping you to come up with your content ideas. Yeah. So for me, keyword research is a really helpful way to know what your audience is searching for and, the popular topics. Maybe medical device is quite a niche area if you're dealing with HCPs, but maybe if you're advertising directly to patients, looking at those key search terms can really give you an idea of what, the problems that they're searching for, the symptoms, treatments that they're looking at. And then you can start creating content based on that. And I think it's worth saying that you can actually use Google to find more content ideas. So you have, when you like type something into Google, it will auto-complete and it will show you like the phrases that people are searching for. And then if you search for a term in Google, at the bottom of the page, it will show you related searches. And those all give you an idea of what people are actually typing into, not necessarily just Google, but into your search engines. And then you take that and you can start creating your own content on it. But it is worth saying that you need to be making better content than the other people who are writing about those topics are making in order to stand a chance of actually ranking for those search terms.
Well, actually, that's a really interesting thing. So when you say better content, what do you mean by better content? And also, what are the other tools that people can use in order to find these keywords and these search terms if they don't just want to use Google?
Yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that you have data. You can't just, trust your intuition. So you need to have that data to back it up. SEMrush is a great tool. You can also use tools like Google Keyword Planner. They'll show you the volume of searches and also the difficulty of how difficult it will be for you to rank for that word, basically. The level of competitiveness that keyword has. And in terms of writing better content, I mean, that's a whole other podcast, isn't it? So it's you can dive into the actual practicalities of how you write good content, but there's also wider.
Okay. If you were to give people 3 tips now on how to write better SEO optimized content, what would those 3 tips be?
For me, it's researching well and making sure that you're not being biased in your writing at all. So creating content is not about promoting your product necessarily. There is a time and a place for that, but the type of content we're talking about is unbiased, honest content that is there to educate people. So number 1 is research well, have evidence for all of everything that you're saying. Number 2 is avoid being biased. And I guess number 3 is to write for audiences instead of search engines, because we can dive into how you can optimize your content. But at the end of the day, you need to be focusing on your audience rather than on search engines and what they want to see.
And I think your point about being an educator is a really important one. It's not about sales, it's about education, because what your audience are trying to do when they come onto your website or read any of your content is they want to educate themselves. They do not want to be sold to, because that's the whole reason they haven't contacted you. So, and they're not contacting you yet. So I think that's a really good point. The other things I was thinking about that are just really quick tips for people who are starting to write content on their own is the average length of articles really needs to be 1,000 to 1,500 words. We try not to put out anything that's under 1,500 as a benchmark, but it depends on what you're talking about. And then also break your content up really, really well. So make sure that you use H1, H2, H3, which basically allows Google to read your content in a really manageable way, and just break your sentences up. I remember you said that to me actually when we started writing loads of content, which we write loads. You said to me, don't put big blocks of paragraphs in because nobody wants to read them. They're really imposing and unattractive. And now whenever I write content, I keep sentences or paragraphs probably to 2 sentences or 2 to 3 lines. I don't go over 3 lines, and then I break it up again. So I think those are really nice things that you can implement to help people easily read your content, which will then keep them on your page longer, better for SEO, all those good things.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is people aren't necessarily reading every single word that you write, unfortunately. I know you painstakingly craft every word, but a lot of the time people are just scanning for the information that they want. So your headings, breaking up your sentences, and you have to think about how it's going to look on mobile as well. If you have massive paragraphs, they are just going to look very unattractive on mobile and very daunting. So
actually, one other thing to talk about, we're talking about copy and text here. One big trend at the moment is, of course, video. And we find the best articles, and we're talking about content, really, when you say coming up with good content ideas, actually they can be video and articles. We just happen to be talking about articles at the moment. But actually combining the two, we find the best performing blogs or articles, or whatever you want to call them, are all the ones that have video in as well. And of course, the video can also be used on your website. It can be used in any information you send out to any future customers. You know, it can be used in all different ways. So I think it's not just to talk about articles, it's also about videos.
Yeah, because people consume content in different ways. Some people want to watch videos because that's how information is processed best in their brain. Some people want to read. Some people just want to listen. So you need to think about how you can be distributing your content in these different mediums, so that your audience can consume it how they want to, basically.
Yeah. And a good guide is actually 50% of your content should be video and 50% should be written.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that all of the content you can write, you can also just film, and then
that's what we do. And it also isn't, this could be very daunting to people who are listening now saying, yes, well, I need to get a film crew in for everything I do. That's not what we do here. Yes, you can do for your real hero content and your quarterly content or something like that, but on an ongoing basis that you can actually film extremely effectively off your iPhone and things like that. So it's all about getting used to it and just getting going with this content.
Yeah, and I think that is more authentic and relatable as well for people that are watching. I think we haven't discussed social listening as a way of finding out what the questions that your audience are asking. So, I mean, social listening is all about being active on social media, obviously. It's about being involved in the conversations that are happening, being engaged in your audience, in your industry. And from that, when you get involved in these discussions that are happening, you can kind of glean the popular topics and see the questions that people are asking or getting into debates about. So you can not jump on that, but you can use that to inform your content strategy as well. I think that's just worth saying is another way of gathering ideas for content. And when you're putting together this plan for how you're going to come up with ideas, it's worth adding in to that plan.
So when we're also talking about social listening, there's two ways of doing it, isn't it? It's more long-term social listening and also short-term. So for example, when we start working in new areas, you will potentially go and have a look at social accounts of relevant people, companies, things like that, and see what they're talking about on that one timestamp. And then you'll also look at it over a long-term period. Yeah. Just for anyone who's thinking about starting this, how do you practically do it? It can be done in a one section or it can be done over a longer term.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, softwares that can help you do that as well. Yes. I was going to say what they were, and they're extremely expensive. So we can put them all down in the links below. I think it's probably time that we talk about the big five a little bit.
Yeah.
And I say the big five as in the questions. Jenna, unless there's something else I've missed and we should talk about something else first.
No, I think we've spoken about that for nearly 20 minutes, so that's pretty comprehensive.
It's amazing how time passes on these. Okay, so this is really important. So if we did a workshop with a company, now this can be thought leadership, this can be for anything. We will take them through these big five questions plus the additional two. And we'll build a framework with them of how to populate all of these. So it's interesting to go through each of these five because some of these things are really uncomfortable for people to talk about, and they might say, no, I can't talk about this. This is not how this works. And it's really about understanding how we can talk about these things. And we've got a lot more content looking at that as well. And of course, if we do a workshop, we do that too. We look at them all in a lot of detail, but let's just take them one by one. So we'll start with cost. And Jenna, I just want to ask you a question, first of all here. So when was the last time you searched for something online to buy?
Well, I think my mum's birthday is coming up, so she loves leopard print, so I was looking at some leopard print pajamas, I think was my last. So,
Okay, and so tell me how that went.
I mean, it went really well. I bought some pajamas.
So what was the process though? So you found the pajamas you wanted online. You probably looked at a couple of different types of pajamas, found the ones you wanted, and what did you then look at?
I think price, once I'd seen some that I liked, was my main concern.
And what would have been the impact had the price not have been available? There's one option. So the option would have been you could have picked up the phone, phoned the company and said, "Hi, I'm really interested in your pajamas. Can you please give me the price so that I can purchase them?" Would you have done that?
Well, no, because I can just click away. It's so much easier just to go somewhere else and find that information. Yeah.
So if they hadn't have had price, what would have been the implication for that?
They
pajama
don't
brand?
have my sale.
Yeah, and you go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this is something, I know it's a B2C example, but it's something that we see across all industries. And so this is sort of the power of actually allowing people to make that choice. And I know one of the big concerns around this is, yes, but actually my competitors are going to see what we're charging. But realistically, do your competitors not always know, not know already, or have a very good idea? I think the other thing to say about cost is when you're talking about pricing, you don't have to give exact pricing. It's really about what are you looking for? You know, if you're online and you're looking about the cost of something, if you're going to make a significant purchase, which in all fairness, all medical devices are, if you're going to make a significant purchase, there's certain sort of things you think about. So you think, if it's a big piece of capital equipment, what's going to drive the price up? What's going to drive the price down? If I want these different things, what would be the average sort of band I'd be looking at? Of course, everything's different. Nothing's always the same. Of course, that's the case. But, if I just to give a rough idea of what this could be. So I think that's sort of a really interesting area with cost. And it's something that people really aren't comfortable talking about. But I think we see it has a ginormous impact when people do, because there's sort of two reasons why we see the big impact. People who are never going to buy it anyway because of cost don't engage. People who were going to buy it, there's no more real discussion around it. They know what that price is. That's really good. But it really shortens the sales cycle as well, because everything's on there. It's very straightforward. So we certainly see this makes a huge impact, although I think it's the hardest thing. It's the biggest impact, but it's the hardest thing for people to get over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you need to remember that it comes down to trust. And if you're not talking about price, that can look really untrustworthy. That people are thinking, well, I'm going to get into this sales process and then they're just going to throw the price on me and it's going to be more than I can afford. There's a reason that they're keeping it secret. So being honest and transparent about that is only going to build trust.
Well, actually, and interestingly, when we look at our industry, it's not done. Like nobody, as in medical device, not marketing, medical device, marketing as well, but medical device. So when we look at the industry, it's just not done. So I suppose the flip of that is not the lack of trust, it's the build of trust. So if you were going to actually be more transparent, and we're not saying you put every single price on there. That's not what this is. It's giving more of a rough idea. But if you did do that, imagine the build and trust that would potentially come from that. And it's really standing out in an industry.
Yeah. And it's acknowledging that it is important to people as well.
Yes. Okay, so the next one, problem questions. What is a problem question, Jenna?
I think when people are looking to spend a lot of money, they're probably thinking, okay, well, what is the risk? They're probably doing some risk assessment and considering what are the problems going to be if I do invest my money in this. And that can be tricky to write about as well because it's admitting your flaws, but actually that's honest and that's transparent and that's building trust, and you can talk about the problems and offer the solutions as well. Would you?
I think that's the really important thing that you say there. You can talk about the problems and offer solutions, because your problems, the problems that you have with the device, I'm pretty certain the competitors are going to know about that. And I'm pretty certain they have an answer for that as well. So if you're transparent about it on your website, and again, this is something we don't see, like this is really a different way of looking at things. But if you're transparent on your website and offer that solution straight away, the trust you build is ginormous through that as well. So yeah, I think it definitely is about, yes, everything has problems, that's life, but what's the solution? So it's a really interesting way. But the number of, this is why when we're doing these workshops, and you might come up with all these questions and say, actually, we're just not comfortable with putting these out there at the moment, and that's fine. But at least it really starts bringing stuff to the surface, and really, it's a great sort of finding out more information about everything.
Yeah, and it shows that you're not just burying your head in the sand and pretending that those problems don't exist.
No. The client will, not the client, the end user will find out about these problems. At some point they will. And the most likely place they're going to find out about it is by your competitors. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's important that we address them. Okay, what about best?
Best can have many meanings. So you have your best practices. That's a big one. But then also, there's so much. It's so easy for people to do comparisons these days, and nobody makes a purchase without knowing all of the options. So best is them looking at the options. Everyone wants the best. Nobody wants the second best or the third best. Everyone wants the number one. And so that's what they're going to be searching for when they're looking what to invest in. And today's audience are more savvy than ever. They can use the internet to find all the answers they need to compare all the products they want to compare.
Or maybe they can't.
Wow, yeah.
And actually, if they could, that'd be great. But interestingly, they can actually in a lot of these. So I know you were looking on the internet earlier, and found some very interesting pages around the best of.
Yes. So I was looking at some medical devices, looking at the best of. And it's quite interesting that there is a lack of medical device comparison. And what is out there is, when I searched these things, it wasn't necessarily comparing devices. It was more how to choose the best one, or just really biased information, which as soon as you look at that and okay, this is just somebody promoting their own device, you're not going to trust that. You're not going to trust what they're saying about their own device, let alone other devices. So yeah, for instance, cardiology pacemakers I looked up, and there was no information about actual pacemakers. It was about the best cardiologists rather than the actual devices.
But that's so interesting, because think about the benefits for patients. So if I'm a patient and I'm about to have a pacemaker, I'm going to search best pacemakers. Now, the question could be, hang on, how can I rank pacemakers? Well, all you can do is rank information that's on other people's websites. You cannot make anything up. You cannot have anything subjective, or you will run into a lot of trouble. But you certainly can do it by information that's freely available. And instead of making the audience search for it themselves, put it in one place for them. And it's not necessarily that you put yours at the top either. That's potentially unbiased. But where are they? They're on your site. You're building trust with them on your site. It has so many greater advantages by running these sort of articles.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess you could say that, the implications of that, I think that's what puts people off. It's that there are potential legal, well, not really.
Yeah, no, there are. Absolutely. If you said something that was untrue or false or biased, yes, there are legal ramifications, and rightly so. But if you don't do that and you do it just with factual information, that's not the case.
Yeah, so people don't need to necessarily worry about writing about their competitors, because all this information is publicly available and they're not saying anything that's untrue.
Yeah, as long as that is the case. I think we do need to be careful in this area for sure. But if it's done right, it will put you to the top of Google very quickly, and it'll get you very fast traffic from potential patients, doctors, things like that. Because that's what people are searching. We know people are searching best because that's in human nature. Everybody wants to know that.
And I think the fact that there isn't that in medical device, people aren't writing that. There's such a big opportunity for companies to come in and swoop those spots up and really capitalize on that audience that are searching for those things.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting. If it's done well and done properly, it's very exciting. Excellent. Okay, I know you looked at some other areas as well, but they pretty much fell into the same category. So we also looked at spinal cord stimulators, insufflators, and endoscopic submucosal dissection devices, just as a broad spectrum across different areas to see if they were all having these sort of articles. We did find those articles, but as you say, they didn't have very good information.
Or they were outdated as well.
That's the other thing. Yeah. So it's a really interesting opportunity. Okay, so the other two are comparisons and reviews. Let's talk about comparisons a little bit. So really, this is looking at how something compares against another. So you couldn't do this. I mean, you can do this on, again, factual things. So all these things, we will say, have to be very transparent, very correct. They must go through regulatory, but this is really looking at different things. So you could do something for reviews like, and actually it could be a best as well, reviews, but it could be something like, different sizes. So again, you're trying to stop your audience having to go and hunt all this information out yourself. You're making their lives easier and putting it all in one place so they can make their decision, but in a very unbiased way. So it could be a size of devices, range of devices, anything that's comparing one factual bit of information against another that's of interest to your audience and will help them. And this is one thing that we haven't spoken about that much, actually, but it's really important. Will help them move through their buyer's journey, because at no point should you ever create any content, well, very little, maybe 25% of your content strategy, if that. You really should not have much content that doesn't move somebody through their buyer's journey. And when we talk about their buyer's journey, it's not necessarily just at the front. It is just at the front. Well, no, it's not just at the front. It can also be at the back. So it can also be onboarding, but the majority is, of course, at the front, because this is about engaging and attracting new people. So if it's not a question that your sales team or your customer would ask, we don't write about it.
We consider that fluff.
We consider that fluff. And the reason it's fluff is because it creates work. It work's needed to do it. And actually nobody's searching for it. Yeah. So there's no point. So it has to have a purpose, and it has to move somebody through their buyer's journey. Totally. Okay, so the final one is very similar to comparisons, and actually can be quite similar to best as well. It's reviews. And it's not totally similar, actually. There are other areas to this. And a great example of this is, Jenna, after you made your last big purchase, what was probably the thing you did before you decided to definitely make it? Jenna, do you have a car?
Yes.
I know you have a car. So when you were thinking about buying a car, what did you do before you bought that car?
I looked at reviews. I wanted to know how once I decided, like, I'd looked at all these best of articles, and I decided, okay, this car has everything that I'm looking for, but does it actually? And I think it's sometimes difficult to trust companies completely, whereas getting reviews from actual people that is who have used this car and they're not biased at all, that's really helpful.
And that's the key. How do we make it so it's totally unbiased? But this is really good for video content. So things like testimonials, things like that. But it has to be honest reviews. And I think that's one thing that is difficult, because human nature, when you're trying to promote your product, is to say, yes, it's really good. It's all good. It's all good. But people who are buying that product know everything can't be perfect. So in order to build that trust, it has to be an honest review. And it spreads into everywhere else, which is really important.
Yeah. I think it's like seeing that there's a problem with something doesn't necessarily put me off the purchase. It's about weighing it up compared to the benefits of it.
Yeah.
So seeing somebody else's experience is, it's going to prevent that buyer's remorse, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. So you've made all your content. Well, you've got all your content ideas. So you've done a content workshop and you maybe have 100 to 150 ideas of really good content that will work. But what happens if you go, well, I just don't have time at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that happens. Content it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job.
I think what you can do in that case is what we have done ourselves in the past when we've had a bigger workload is looking back at your old content and refreshing it. I think that is actually incredibly helpful to do. It's really beneficial for your SEO. It's considered like a quick win of SEO, which just doesn't happen. Like SEO is a long game, but it's considered a quick win because it shows search engines that you're going back and you're looking at your content and seeing how you can make it more useful for your audience. And you're trying to provide the most value possible. So you can go back, refresh your old content. I think that sometimes the best ideas have already happened and you can just build on those. So in terms of how you can practically do this, you can go back to your old articles, you can look through, add new statistics, update if you've had new ideas since then, you can update. If there's been new research, you can update that. Or you might look at your old articles and see that, you've kind of skimmed over something, which could be an article in itself. You can go into like a more detailed article within the article, from within an article, and then you can link back and forth between those two articles. And you can also repurpose your old content. So for an article, you can make that into a video. You can make a long video and shorten that and put that out on social media. You can make a podcast based on an article. I think that's how you can continue to deliver the same amount of content, just with a bit less work involved, so that you can focus your priorities other places in your business that you need to temporarily.
But you keep serving the search engine and you keep serving your audience because you're continually refreshing that content, which is going to push you up the rankings. I think one thing that I always say, well, I think a lot of people probably say it, but I definitely say it, it's the most exciting thing about content. It does take a long time to do. It does. It is a full-time job. And actually there's different ways of doing it. It might not be, often it's not the best idea for your agency to write that content because they don't know your business like you do. In fact, often it's better to bring that in-house. And that's something actually that we work with companies a lot to do, to help them to deliver all this content internally. And we can train people up to do that. But I think the most exciting thing about content is it never sleeps. So it's working for you. You're on holiday, you're in bed, it never gets tired. So if you've got good content, it's always delivering the most. It's amazing. So really thinking about generating good content that your audience want to hear about is amazing. And what is it doing for you? It helps, as you said at the beginning, Jenna, it helps your audience to make their decision before they even get in contact with your sales team. And when they're in contact with the sales team, they're pretty much 80% convinced, maybe even more, that this is the right thing for them. And then it's a very quick decision and a quick sales process, which frees your sales team up to then do more and more and more. So although there's a big effort into content creation, the rewards are ginormous when it's done well.
Yeah, I mean, it's passive marketing, isn't it? It's always working in the background. A person can be reading all of the content on your website, consuming all that content, and that is 80% of the sales process already done before they even get in touch with your sales team. And that can happen at any time, and you don't have to be involved with that. You just put the time and the effort in the beginning, and then it just works.
It's true. It is amazing. It is amazing. So cool. So that, Jenna, I don't know if you've got anything else to say. I think we've covered pretty much everything about new content, how to create new content ideas. We've only really touched on the surface. There's an awful lot more around what you can do here. But I think the message is it's endless, and you can really create anything as long as you're addressing your buyers' questions, you're bringing the whole team in, and it's moving people through your buyer's journey.
Yeah, and I think before we sign off, it's worth mentioning competitors. I think it can be quite tempting to go and look at your competitors' websites to see what they're writing about, and can I jump in on that and beat them on that? I think that's not, in terms of our beliefs, that's not the best way to go. I think you need to focus on the content that's entirely relevant to your audience rather than trying to compete with your competitors in that way, because you might just end up with fluff, you know?
And a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, and not what you really need.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about content, actually, just before we leave, is it's not just about your website. So all your content can be on your website, but actually a really interesting use for content is all those things that your team are saying over and over and over again. They can send those links out to prospective, HCPs, whoever they're speaking with, which actually relays all that information for them. So it can also be used. And actually the best type of content is also used as sales aids as well. So there's a mixture of how you can use all this content. But it's really exciting. When we always get so excited.
It's always exciting to see, one piece of content, how many different ways it can be used and how much it can really, help your marketing, your sales strategy. We just get really excited about it.
No, and we should probably stop soon, but I think the only one final thing to say, and this isn't about how to create really great content, although it sort of is, you must make sure that you measure what content is working and what content isn't. And there's lots of tools out that can do this. We work with Lido. HubSpot is another great one. There's lots of different technologies that can do this, but that will show you what's working, and then you can see what you need to redo. Otherwise, you are working a touch blind. So I think that's the only thing I'd say when you are creating new content. Once you've started running with content and you're creating a significant amount, it's then about having a look back and saying, actually, what is working? Because that might change your strategy for the next 3 months of what content is going to come out.
Yeah, but also be patient. It takes time. Content is not a quick win marketing strategy, but it's very effective.
And hard to catch up with.
Yes.
Once somebody's there. Lovely. Okay, great. So thank you, Jenna, for all your information on this podcast. We've got a lot more information on our website. So I hope you found this interesting. If you want to read more, please go to our Learning Centre, our Learning Hub. We've also got a lot of information across the site as well. Or if you have any questions about anything to do with inbound, content creation, things like that, please get in contact and we'd be more than happy to discuss it with you. Thanks again, Jenna. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.